Good afternoon, my name is Sarah Sefton. These are my Unit 4 station observations in combination with NWS measurements and weather maps. My observations were recorded in the Steel Creek neighborhood just north of Fairbanks. The observations ran from January 22nd through February 2nd, and each recording was taken between 3 and 4 p.m. each day, making it the warmest part of the day for the most part. The NWS location that I'm utilizing is the Fairbanks International Airport Station. Overall, my week of measurements was higher than the NWS reported measurements. This is due to the fact that I'm located in the hills and we experience the temperature inversion so that we are slightly warmer in the winter and slightly cooler in the summer. So this would explain why on the chart my temperatures are fairly separate from the NWS measurements, though over the week the trend of the temperatures going up in the middle of my observations and down towards the end again is consistent with the measurements from the NWS station. On day one, my temperature measurement was around 13 degrees. My max was 23.4 degrees and minimum was around 7 degrees. The NWS reported a temperature of 0 degrees for that day. I used the 0 degrees came from the measurement at about 3:53 p.m. This is consistent with when I was taking my measurements, and I was about 13 degrees higher that day. On day two, I measured at about 20.5 degrees Fahrenheit, and the maximum was 22.8 degrees that day, the minimum 15.3 degrees. The NWS reported a temperature of -8 degrees Fahrenheit. This is a larger difference than the first day. On day three, I had a station temperature of around 23 degrees. My maximum temperature that day was 28.5, the highest that I measured throughout my 5-day readings. And the minimum was 20.6, also the highest minimum throughout my readings. The NWS reported a temperature of 5 degrees on that day. On the fourth day, my measurement was at 9.3 or 9.8 degrees Fahrenheit. At the time of my measurement, the minimum recorded was 15.7, or maximum, excuse me, was 15.7 or 21 degrees. This was the day that I had some issue with my probes being different. I rearranged them so that the sun was not hitting them, and that corrected the problem. I assume that the sun was the problem because my maximum temperature when the sun would have been hitting the probes had a 6-degree difference, where my minimum temperatures were the same, meaning when the sun was not hitting the probes. And that was at 8.7, those minimums for day 4, February 1st. The NWS reported that day a temperature of 0 degrees. Again, on day 4, the difference between my measurements in the hills and the measurements at Fairbanks International Airport were closer at only 9 degrees difference. On day 5, February 2nd, I recorded a temperature of 11.1 degrees. At the time of my measurement, the maximum recorded that day was 16.9 or 18 degrees. So I did have my probes a little bit closer that day. The NWS reported temperature was a -2 that day. So a little bit larger difference of about 13 degrees from my measurement to the NWS measurement on that day. The barometric pressure was fairly close to the NWS measurements. My low was slightly different than theirs. My low was on the first day of measurement, January 29th, at a station pressure of 982 millibars. The NWS recorded 1,010 millibars on that day, so slightly higher than my observation on that day. On day 2, January 30th, our measurements were nearly identical. Mine station pressure being 1,026 millibars and the NWS station pressure being 1025. On day 3, January 31st, my station pressure was 1029 millibars, and again the NWS was very close at 1031 millibars. On day 4, February 1st, my station measurement was 1043 millibars, and the NWS station measurement was 1045. My pressure remained steady on the following day at 1043 millibars, and the NWS's temperature also remained stable through day 5 at 1045 millibars for their measurement. So very close, and both measurements leveled out at the same point on day 4 and remained stable through the measurement on day 5. Here we see the weather map for January 30th, Monday. There are high systems to the east and a low pressure system off to the west. Can see an occluded front, which to my understanding is a mix of cold and hot, warm fronts when they collide and come together. And that is moving in an eastward direction. The high pressure systems coming in would coincide with the large increase in station pressure that I recorded from 982 millibars on the day before on January 29th through to 1026 millibars the following day on January 30th, which we see here. I did mark Fairbanks in the small pink X there to sort of show my location. On this day, January 30th, I recorded very light cloud cover, just a quarter of the sky, alto cumulus clouds, so see-through and not very heavy cloud cover, which can be seen here on the map at the X symbol, which would be my location. The next day, Tuesday, January 31st, there is a high pressure system pushing over the Fairbanks area, which is consistent with the still increasing station pressure measurements at 1029 on this day, millibars on this day in my location. There is a warm front pushing in from the north to the north from south, which would coincide with the increased temperatures that we saw on this day. And there is an increase of clouds. That high pressure system that's pushing the warm front up is also moving those clouds up into our area. This was the cloudiest day, January 31st, of my observation. We had altostratus clouds covering nearly the entire sky, and though the clouds were very light, it was the most complete cover that I had during my measurements. We see here Wednesday, February 1st. Again, I have Fairbanks marked there with a pink X. On this day, the high pressure remained over Fairbanks. This is when the pressure leveled out according to my measurements. At my station pressure was 1043 millibars. The NWS measured at 1045 millibars. So very close, and this is where it leveled out, so that high pressure system right over my area. There was two cold fronts sort of moving into the area, and on this day the temperature did drop at my station significantly, about 14 degrees from the previous day, January 31st, into this day, February 1st. So that would be the effect, I believe, of those cold fronts pushing in on the area. Here we have Thursday, February 2nd. The high pressure remains. As I said, it leveled out on this day, so this makes sense. The cloud cover has decreased from the highest point on January 31st. Now on the 2nd, cloud cover was very, very low. The pressure has remained stable and the temperature has continued to drop, I believe, as an effect of those cold fronts we saw moving in on the previous day. And here is a composite image of the weather map the visible, infrared, and water vapor from January 31st. So these were consistent with what I observed on this day. Although the cloud cover looks very light, especially in the water vapor map, this was the day of the most cloud cover in my area. There was, however, no precipitation on this day, and in fact, no precipitation throughout the 5-day period of my observations. So that would explain why the water vapor map shows nearly no cover over our area, even though in my observation the sky was nearly completely covered, though with very light clouds. This you can see a little bit better on the infrared map. Our area is covered with sort of a lighter gray, the edges of sort of that front that the high pressure system seem to be moving north from the southern part of the state up north. The patterns of the clouds also trace along the lines of that front being pushed up by the high pressure system from the south. These are my overall observations, and I did my best to compare them to the NWS information and to the maps that were provided. I hope that they were close, at least. Thank you.